The world has a problem. Millions of smallholder farmers barely produce enough to feed their families. Why? They lack modern solutions to monitor crops and livestock, the means to preserve and restore the land. And chemicals, deforestation, and climate change create new threats. Without help, small farms will struggle to survive. At Dimitra, our connected farmer platform delivers blockchain, machine learning, IoT, and satellite data to smallholder farmers worldwide, empowering each user with cutting-edge technology and services. We generate value across a new ecosystem, value in which we all share as farmers, Dimitra token holders, and members of a global community, where each user, regardless of economic status, has access to simple, beautiful, and life-changing technology to increase yield, reduce cost, and mitigate risk. Crop after crop, herd after herd, season after season, Dimitra improves the lives of farmers worldwide.
Thanks. My marketing guys worked really hard on that. So today we're going to talk about supply chain, and supply chain is a really interesting use case for blockchain. And my panel here has a lot of expertise in supply chain, specifically in industry, in food, in pharmaceuticals. I've been working in supply chain for 30 years, building technology. I've built full ERP systems. I've built mobile systems and applications, probably about 70 major platforms and pieces of software throughout my career. And Dimitra is one of those. So Dimitra we launched a couple years ago, did a POC about 3 years ago, ran our first platform on it last May. We have about 18 million users now of the platform, and it's a combination of blockchain, satellite, and all those things you saw in the video. I've got a team of about 150 developers working on it full time, and we're working now in 70 countries. So I'd like to introduce a couple experts, and I should go to the introduction pages. I'll skip over me. Ellen is the president and CEO of Genesis TMG. Ellen has a great background. She's written a couple books on AI and blockchain. She's done some work in pharmaceuticals. She's got some great concepts around food safety and food security that she's building into her platform. She's done some architecture. Ellen, give you a couple minutes to talk about yourself if you could.
Take all these things. Good morning. My name is Ellen. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ellen Creighton. First, let me just say thanks to Gerard and the GBA team. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to get to know people like me in the industry as contributors. Again, my name is Ellen Creighton. I have a small business here in the DMV. We develop digital transformation services and applications using 4R technologies. And I don't want to make this about me, so I'm going to turn this back to him so we can talk more about what we have to offer you today. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ellen.
Thanks.
So our next panelist is Rakjun Choi. Rakjun has a background at IBM Food Trust, working in the blockchain area, and currently is the VP of Blockchain Business Development Strategic Partners at Torquata, and he's working in the American tire distribution business. That's a very long title, so it must be really important. Rakjun, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks, John. Hello, everybody. My name is Rock. So I represent American Tire Distributors. Torquata is the data and analytics branch of the company. And so I focused on supply chain blockchain for the past 5-6 years, starting with IBM Food Trust, and then with the success of Food Trust, we looked into different industries as well. So my job was, let's go visit every other industry, figure out how they can use blockchain. So I've been in industrials, retail electronics. For those of you who are into pharma, we also kind of took part in the DSCSA Act, which is Drug Supply Chain Security Act, which was very popular a couple of years ago. And so that's where I find the passion is learn industry problems across the supply chain, not individual companies inside the four walls, and see how blockchain can actually help that. So I'm looking forward to meeting with everybody. Thank you for GBA and also John for hosting us today. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, and like I said, I'm John Trask, CEO of Blockchain Guru and of Dimitra. So I just put together some questions. It was interesting. I got to meet both of these people yesterday and learn a little bit about their story. And they both have amazing stories and have worked on some amazing projects in their life. And from what I learned yesterday, I just put together a couple questions. So Rakjun, you've transitioned from IBM Food Trust to an industrial company focused on tires. This is really interesting to me. That's a big transition, right? From food safety and security to tire management. So what are the similarities relative to the application of blockchain? And what are the differences that you're finding as you're transitioning from industry to industry?
Great, thanks, John. So in the supply chain, if you look at it from a generic sense, the problems are all the same, right? You have producers, you have distributors, and you have retailers and consumers, and everybody plays a role in that ecosystem. That doesn't change whether it's food or whether it's tires. And everybody's thinking the same thing is, I want to know what happens upstream, where's my product coming from? And they want to know downstream, where's my product going to? So there's a fundamental need of understanding that level of transparency today in the digital age. The also other thing is people want to get good data across the supply chain. Everybody's very good at understanding their data inside the four walls, but when it leaves those four walls, can I trust the partner's data? Can I trust their performance? Those are all impacting how you strategize your operations, because that's the problem with supply chain is you're not only working with yourself, you're working with partners across the board. So those problems are very similar. Now, the difference is how they work in the dynamics of your supply chain. I'll give you an example. In food, when we were working with Food Trust, the farming side, the very first point of upstream capability, that's where the biggest fragmentation is. You got 20,000 farms all selling into distributors who then sell to Walmart. So Walmart has a lot of leverage in that relationship, but then the farmers actually don't have the level of technical maturity to provide the data that a company like Walmart wants. So that's one dynamic. On the tire side, you got the complete opposite. The manufacturers who build the tires actually have a lot of leverage on where their products go, because we'll get to that later, but there's a shortage of supply to meet the demand all the time. So what's the goal of the manufacturers? I got to pick and choose which people do I send my tires to make sure that I get my business done. And coffee, for example, is the middle is the whole gray area, because they trade so many times before they land in your cup. So those dictate different dynamics, different power games, and that's what's so interesting about learning about these industries is which levers do you push and incentivize them to make a business sustainable from a blockchain point of view. Thanks, John.
I guess to build on that question, I look at it, and so in the food business, we're dealing with farmers, and we're dealing with sugarcane farmers in South America and coffee farmers in Indonesia, and there's subtle regional differences. And then when you look at that supply chain, compare it to an American or Western European supply chain, there's a lot of different challenges that we have here. Ellen, I guess just to build on Rakjun's question, you've transitioned from pharmaceuticals here in America to food. Do you have anything to add to that conversation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. CDC published that as it is estimated that 1 in 6 Americans, about 48 million persons, will get sick annually. 128 will be hospitalized, and 3,000 would die of foodborne diseases. The question to us is that we've seen cases where individuals ate fruits, and I have a specific Washington, D.C. case on strawberries. And then, of course, this kid, Alex Donnelly, you may have heard of him, he died from eating contaminated burger. He had this very serious strain of E. coli from that burger. It took a long time to trace and track where the source of that problem happened. Now, is it possible for us here today to use blockchain to make that problem go away or even to minimize that issue. One is to get to the source very quickly, and two is to track and trace the source of your food from seed to your table, making sure that whatever you put into your body is safe and is not going to cause you to get sick. Blockchain is able to bring that to the table for us. In my own case, I'm looking at right here in Virginia, getting 10 acres of land minimally to actually grow organic food and use blockchain as my platform to deliver that food door to door so that everyone's sure they can actually use the application to click and look at that particular food, point to that particular produce, and see exactly where it came from using track and trace in blockchain, building trust, coming back to his situation with food trust. And this is my idea. I like to personalize blockchain because people always have a very difficult time understanding just blockchain. Everybody thinks it's fintech. So I think now this is an opportunity for us to use actual use cases, and this is why I appreciate John's company, because he's doing blockchain in agriculture, and I think that's now that we have food safety and food security problems, I think that is going to solve a lot of it. You can have all the money in the world in fintech, but if you don't have food to buy, it's not going to work well for you. So that's my point exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you step back and look at that, you're looking at a regional, what you can touch strategy relative to food, plus a global strategy.
Exactly.
And you probably need to approach those a little differently.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that? I'd like to ask each of you to speak about that for a minute.
Okay, John. Please go ahead. Okay. Globally, I have relatives in South Africa, obviously, and we are very big on organic foods there. Globally speaking, people like John's company, of course, doing very well. And of course, I attended a UN conference years ago, and the topic of that conference was food safety, but most important, food security. And it is companies like Dimitri that's going to help to supply the world with safe food, to bring food and animal produce from the farm to your table. And successfully, because he's utilizing blockchain for tracking and traceability and trust.
And IBM had all kinds of challenges with global scale versus individual projects.
Absolutely. So if you look at from a global macro point of view, we often use this term, the chain is as strong as its weakest link, and that is no exception when it comes to blockchain. The supply chain area, it's interesting, as I mentioned, is it's not just you running a fintech company or a trading platform that solves the problem. You got to work with the ecosystem. And oftentimes when you expand this globally, to John's point, the standards, the capabilities, the mindset of people working with you are very different, and it's very difficult to work with them. I'll give you two examples. One automotive client, yes, they're based in Detroit. I'll let you guess one of them. They say they have great visibility into tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers because they're all in the North America region. But their tier 3 and 4 come from China, Indonesia, Thailand, where sometimes they don't even know where their factory is even located at. Then how can you actually trust them to provide the right products at your quality concerns so that you can actually put your logo on the product and then sell it? I'll give you an example. Takata airbags, we all heard about that a couple years ago, right? They had no ability to trace where it came from when they go into the tier 4 supplier. That was in Japan. Another example I can share with you is around apparel. I work with one of those big Spanish companies that does major fast fashion apparel. A lot of their clothing comes from Bangladesh and Pakistan. And those people in factories, you heard about the Bangladesh factory burning down and they lost a lot of workers. That's the conditions they work in to meet the profit challenges that their parent company has. And they have no way to track if it's ethically sourced or if they're going through proper practices. You can't put all of their timesheets on blockchain and then monitor that, right? So there has to be a combination of the technology, the processes, and then as you heard yesterday from Professor Liu, the people, to make sure that this trinity works together to make sure that the value of blockchain is best realized. And it's not going to be perfect in the beginning, but you got to iterate and start at some point with the right incentive for every stakeholder in the industry. Thanks, John.
Thanks. Yesterday, Ellen shared with me her vision, her deck of how she wants to change the world. And it's a great deck, and hopefully people will get a chance to see it. When we were talking, you were passionate in talking about use cases and blockchain utility.
That's right.
And maybe you could elaborate a little bit on blockchain utility for people, because that may or may not be, that may be a little different than crypto utility that some people are familiar with.
I told John the story that I had lunch with a very, very high executive in one of the government contracting companies here in the DMV. And we were talking about blockchain, something we've talked about for over 3 years. And what I realized is that even at that level, she still didn't get the blockchain. It was all about talking about the hashtag and the technology. If you've been in technology for a long time, you know the architecture, that blockchain box sits in the middle of the grand architecture, as he just said. There are other technologies that will interplay with blockchain to enable it to deliver for all of us in ways that we want to. But importantly, I felt at that time and point in time, I decided to focus on food. I think when we bring utility, the use, what blockchain for good or just for good? What it is we're going to do for the person that is not a technology guru or doesn't want to hear blockchain anymore. What are we going to do? They even here in the DC area, they decided to call it DLT, decentralized ledger, just to clamp down the name blockchain for a bit so people can listen to them. But it is the utility that I want to focus on. I always talk about, sometimes I tell my friend, when I was heading up a big office in South Africa, a government place that serviced 12 government offices or departments, the head of department would say, what's in it for me for life? And I would sit down and say, oh my God, whenever you're articulating technology, especially 4RR technology, which is really fantastic, but we have to be able to integrate them well so we enjoy the utility. Let's talk about what the utilities are, hence the use cases. In the case of pharma, health and food, and of course, the last mile, which I always refer to the supply chain side. Because without the last mile, you're still not getting it to the people. So all of these things together will make life, or what I call the life thing, much better for us. We should always think about, who am I talking to? I had a conversation this morning with someone. People talk about diversity, inclusion, and culture. It's a phenomenon that's been around for a long time. But in the context of that, we're talking about solutions and utility. It's not about just sampling of people involved and you see a shade of people. It's about the utility that we contribute to and bring to the table. Culturally, different culture in South Africa, from New York, where I spend most of my life, than it will be in, say, Nigeria or in London and those places, and in Copenhagen and Milan, my favorite places to speak. But so we will come with that knowledge. The good news is that we have people like you in this room who are knowledgeable and have that intellectual capability. Now let's talk about the use cases, more of that, so that people understand it. Let's stop talking about a hash. Okay? I mean, that's just my little 2 cents into the grand scheme of things. And that's why I like Devote. You stood yesterday and you talk about elections and people. And the reason I like Devote, it doesn't know who you are, you just vote. And I love that product. I went home yesterday as I'm driving. I said, I thought about that use case. Now he has it. I have to talk to him about that. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too much.
So one of the things that comes out of that conversation when we talked yesterday was a little about security.
Yes.
And, I look at security a little differently. I've done projects in Africa and Asia and North America and South America. And what each country is trying to achieve is very different. There's very different constraints. Identity for voting is problematic. I worked on a platform in DRC a couple of years ago, and there was such a large percentage of the people who really didn't have an identity the way we see it here in North America. How that fits together from a project implementation perspective, what are your thoughts on that, Rakjun?
Sure, I'll be happy to go. So when people think about security, a lot of people quickly associate cybersecurity with that concept. But if you expand the concept of security a little bit, there's two other things I want to bring in. One is the overall supply chain security, meaning how do you maintain the supply chain to be healthy? And the other one is to make sure that the entities you deal with are also secure and trusted. And I think that's where concepts like sovereign and devote kind of come in. The first part of it is that, again, it's a supply chain, is a multitude of players. If we put everything on the blockchain as is, what's going to stop Walmart from buying from the distributor and then go straight to the farm? That is not a healthy supply chain, because that cuts out the people who are helping that distribution of the first stage product. So the ability to secure the trust of your participants to join the ecosystem is extremely critical in the success of the platform. Why would somebody in the middle want to join a platform where the end two people that I make money off of are connecting with each other and they're cutting me out? That's not how you operate a supply chain, and trust me, a lot of people have tried it and it does not help. There's a reason why these distribution models exist. The second part of it is trusting the participants, individual companies. Why? If you look at a typical company, it takes about 90 days to validate and onboard a supplier on your network. 90 days. Why? You got to go through the background check, see what their tax records are, see what their identities are. Do they actually exist? Is it a shell company? All of that takes about 90 days, and it doubles internationally, and it quadruples for government contracting. Everybody here knows what I'm talking about, right? So having a trusted identity, much like a KYC solution for industry, is also extremely important. But we're very early in those stages today, but that's where some of the values of a secure supply chain running on blockchain can bring, is that it can accelerate the way the industry expands. And that's more important now because we have less people, we have more challenged logistics, we all know what's going on in the supply chain today. And those are all issues that we are now facing that did not surface when the economy was booming. Okay, thanks, John.
So, Ellen, yesterday you were very passionate about trust. You glow when you get to talk about trust and how blockchain works. Can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to tell you a short story as he was speaking. We were deploying biometrics for the South African government. And of course, people are not trustworthy of government anywhere, whether it's US or otherwise. And I always put in my forehead, why? So I had to speak to a whole group of people about why biometrics, because I got these very strong things. I'm not going to give you anything because I don't trust you. So I told the guy a little story. I mean, we talk about blockchain today, but biometrics technology and the interplay of all of that, yeah, the interplay of all of that is very important to the way we deploy. Okay, you bring your whole mind to the table to make sure it happens. This person stood up, a town person from Soweto, and he's very, very respected. And he said, you're going to take my blood, you're going to take my iris, and then what? You're going to do what to it? And I said, sir, when you get on the HOW train and you pass out because you're suffering from diabetes and nobody knows anything about you, you will die, because the parametrics will come and they will administer the wrong medicine. He said, what do you mean? I said, by them looking at your biometrics with a little chip on your watch or anywhere, they can determine then and there the right medicine for you to save your life. He said, oh my God, is that it? I said, sure, as simple as that. He got it. Immediately he understood. There's a little correlation between trust and getting the services to the individual that distrusts. And this is what blockchain is all about. If you can tell the story about, you don't need trust. You don't zero trust. People talk about those things, but you don't need trust. If you're selling diamond to him, you don't need trust, because the blockchain, the intermediary, or any city, London, England, bank of trust that holds the diamond will deliver it to you, and you don't have to know me. Yeah?
Absolutely. I think trust is a big factor in blockchain. I think there's a lot of functionality that we can deliver. I think the healthcare incidents that we see, intercountry healthcare, interstate healthcare, access of medical records, it fits. Supply chain, it fits in so many places. I think the other big priority for organizations around the world is sustainability and the environment. And I think both of you have a piece to say about that. Rakshun, you're having some interesting work in the tire company because there's some unique challenges there.
Sure. So as I had mentioned in the very beginning, every industry has its own dynamics in the supply chain. In the tire industry, where my day job is today, we have what we call a 30 to 70 problem. No, this is not like a 20-80 where 20% of the people do all the work. It's more like there's a 30% overproduction in the industry, and there's a 70% fill rate in the industry. What I mean by that is the manufacturers are making 30% more product than demand, and the retailers are only getting 70% of their orders filled. And why is that? Why are you making too much on this side but not having enough on the other? The big question is the data discrepancy across the supply chain. There's not enough accurate data to tell you, I need X amount of tires in this location. So what happens is the tires that need to be in Miami end up in Seattle. And these are not CPG products you can put on a plane and ship. This is like big, clunky, ugly objects that go in a car. There's only so many of them, and they need to travel by the road across the country. And all of you have actually had this experience. Is like when you walk in to change your tires, chances are you do your online research, I know what I want, that's the car that I need. You walk into the store seeing that they have inventory, and then they tell you, we actually don't have it, but here's another thing that we can sell you. That's a typical practice in the tire industry. So what we're doing with blockchain and how we're helping that with data is, if we can capture the accurate amount of products that are being made and distributed across the industry, then we have an accurate view of what the supply and demand will look like for the future. Today, that's all done within the silos of each individual company. So how does corporate America operate? You sold 100 next month. Next month, we want you to do 5% more because we're going to make more profit. And then thus, everybody keeps producing more tires out there. And what does that mean for the environment? Tires are one of the biggest pollutants in the industry. So you're burning more tires, you're creating more carbon consumption in a very bad way. And then the retirement options for tires is also burning them for oil. So overall, that's extremely not friendly for the government, not for the government and the planet. It's also very bad for the logistics part. Imagine I sent tires the wrong way, now I need a truck to send the tires to the correct direction. That's double the mileage and the emissions that you have to run on your trucks. So there's a huge impact of how getting good data using a blockchain with trusted operations that will then funnel into the metrics that we need to properly measure supply and demand matching, but also emissions. And all of that's going to be done with a smart contract. Why? We could trust the data that's coming into the blockchain. So that's kind of the strategy that we like to run when it comes to supply chain and sustainability. Thanks, John.
So we have about 4 minutes left, and I did have some more questions, but I think you guys can all run us down in the hallways and talk. I'd like to open it to the floor, and there's a microphone here.
Yes, may I? Yes, we actually have a product for what you're describing. It is called dTrace, which allows you not only to trace the any manufactured good from the origin to the point of sale, but also, more importantly, and going back to your question about intermediaries, it actually incentivizes and rewards by tokens intermediaries that perform a certain function on time, diligently, whatever is required. So there's a whole tokenomics behind making it worthwhile for every participant. So I'm just wondering if you have thought about that types of incentive for everyone who is in the supply chain membership. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm not sure if Rakshun has an answer. I can tell you that within our platform, we have an incentive platform for farmers. So as they provide data to us, they earn points, and those points can roll up to tokens if their country allows them to use tokens. And we use multiple tokens, so we've built tokens for certain nations. So we can reward in their tokens, or we can reward in other tokens. It's an interesting piece around how do you reward the supply chain? And there's so many players in the supply chain, and how do you manage those? And crypto is a great tool for bringing them together. So we have time for one last question, and go ahead.
It's kind of related. We've talked a lot about the supply chain. So if you think about that journey, it goes from seed to plate, fork to farm. Farm to fork. There's all kinds of intermediaries. Well, what do you do with we talk about cutting out the intermediaries, but how do we deal with the intermediaries that don't want to be cut out of the system? So what kind of stories we have in terms of those people that are involved in the supply chain or the certification processes that are not willing to step out, or they kind of want to strike back? So how do we deal with those kind of issues?
So let me say, when we do crypto projects, and you guys can add to this, but crypto to me is about community, and those are members of the community. We're not trying to design a system to take members of the community out. We're working on Sumatran coffee right now, and you have farmers, and you have buyers, and you have dryers, and you have baggers, and then you've got the shipping company, and all of these members of the supply chain, and they play a critical role. The farmer isn't in a position to dry all of their coffee, nor are they in a position to meet the standards that Starbucks or Peet's or whoever your coffee distributor puts on them. So you need those intermediaries. They may play a different role in the supply chain in the future, but in the food area, I haven't seen an area where we're really displacing them. Where we're displacing people maybe in the financial markets. So you've got to look at that a little differently around how you manage that on exports, on trade finance, on LOIs with banks, and what are the payment processes, and is the bank part of the future payment process? In today's world, the answer is almost always, right? People can't buy everything they need in life with crypto today. So the bank still plays a huge, huge role, but the bank also sees it as risk. How do they secure that? So it's a really interesting question. We could talk about it probably for a whole day. Yeah. But I'm out of time, Val.
And I'll be happy to talk about both of your questions separately too.
So John, Rack, and Ellen, thank you very much. It was a very informative. I found it very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.